Welcome to the Russian language. In this course, you can learn how you can achieve fluency on your own. We are glad to welcome you. Our company is called LinguaSkill. We are engaged in designing training materials for developing skills of free conversation in foreign languages. And we would like to present our option for self-learning conversational skills. We're not going to look at grammar at all here. We are going to explain how to effectively ensure that you build up a fluent speech skill. So, how do people master foreign languages even in adulthood? And how do they do this at a level that can be called irreversible, when their ability to speak a foreign language becomes a skill? Let's talk a little bit about the theory and the hypothesis that form the basis of our training material, our version of achieving fluency of speech. First of all, we must say that the brain is our protector. It protects us from an overabundance of information and allows us not to overfill our third structure with unnecessary information. In order to put any information in long-term memory, this primarily concerns foreign languages because there is always a large amount of information here. We need to make some breakthrough in this protection, which must be supported by active reproduction. The whole secret is that for a certain time there is something restructuring. We all know that there are neurons in the human brain. When we receive new information, weak electrical connections are established between neurons. Primary electrical connections that just briefly capture any information that we perceive from the outside world, visual, auditory, and so on. If we do not actively reproduce these for a certain time, our brain will think that it is no longer needed, and these electrical connections break up, and we do not remember anything. But if we actively reproduce this information over time, we can translate these weak and easily decaying electrical connections into biochemical ones. This period of time has long been quite defined by mankind empirically. It's about 1 week. Therefore, neural connections used by our brain within 7 days are considered electric. When the brain understands that we need this information for more than 7 days, it converts these connections into biochemical ones. Of course, there are more complex processes and the mechanisms are not so simple, but the basic principle that we need to understand for our tasks is precisely this. Sleep is even more important in the formation of neural connections. This is also not news. It is also long noticed by mankind. You have processed a large amount of information, and during the sleep period, the brain goes through various stages: falling asleep, plunging into a deep sleep, waking up, and so on. And all this affects the quality of neural connections, and hence the quality of stored information. So, very briefly, what is the basis of our approach? We need to make a primary download of information at a very high speed to form as many primary electrical connections as possible. Then we need to strengthen those links by concentrating. This, of course, is not easy. It may seem difficult and boring, but it does not work without it in any way. The next step is positive feedback, which means we have to give our brain a signal which confirms that the information uploaded is correct. This applies, among other things, to new foreign words, terms, concepts, and so on. The first reproduction is also very important. That is, we are talking here about reproduction, not repetition. The difference between reproduction and cramming is that cramming is the repetition of what you hear or read, and reproduction is an attempt to recall, meaning it's the process of remembering information. In fact, these are different mental processes that occur in our head. And sleep, as we said earlier. So, the alternation of reproduction, recollection, and sleep for 7 days leads to such a result when there is a long-term and stable retention of information loaded in our brain. This is a very important point. We need to work with our short-term memory. This is based on a simple postulate that our brain, our attention, cannot handle more than 7 objects at the same time. In other words, our attention cannot extend to 7 plus or minus 2 objects at any given time. If we draw an analogy with computer technology, our RAM is limited to this number of objects of attention. We always assume that we need to work simultaneously with 5 units of information, for example, 5 words, 5 speech patterns, and so on. Once again, 7 days is one of the most important postulates on which we are based. We need to work out 7 days of any material, any information that we need to remember. And now we turn to the practical aspects. We will talk about the models that are the basis of our method of learning of foreign languages. At its core, speech models also do not represent something new and unknown to mankind before. Our approach to them is simply somewhat more creative. We made the speech patterns 3-layered. These are patterns of speech on which any oral speech is based. To learn the words of a foreign language is not enough. Of course, knowledge of a large number of foreign words is a necessary condition, but it is not enough to achieve the skill of speaking. Speech models can help us understand how words are formed into phrases and how words interact with each other. We must have words at our disposal. We must have an understanding of grammar. For example, if you play tennis and want to achieve some sports qualification, you need to put in a lot of effort and do it in the right order, using specially compiled training to achieve mastery. The same thing applies with respect to foreign languages. That's why we are now talking about models, which are speech patterns necessary for the formation of skills. Our task is to try to make this activity more rational, so that there is no cramming. Let's assume that cramming is a repetition of what you hear or read. It is the method of parrots, and the correct and rational working out of material, rational from the point of view of achievement of the best result for the best time, is a more meaningful process, which is reproduction and recalling. Our material will help you to do this for a more rational time. Using models can be compared to painting a fence. Gradually, layer by layer, you apply your neural connections. You create these connections, you hold them. Then again you apply a layer of connections and hold the previous layer. Then there is a consolidation of bonds. And then you go into the functioning zone, that is in the zone of skill. So we have touched on the theory a little bit, and it's quite enough for the moment. Let's move on to more practical aspects. Let's talk about how our speech models work by introducing some very simple concepts. One short sentence in English and Russian we call a speech pattern. 3 speech patterns will make up one model. For now, we will just remember this terminology. Later, in practice, you will clearly understand what it is about. All models are combined into one collection. About 200 models, let me remind you, each model has 3 speech patterns. That is about 600 phrases is one collection. Why do we need 3 speech patterns, 3 pairs of sentences in one model? The first speech pattern lays the basis of connections. Remember the petting of the fence. The second speech pattern reinforces this basis and adds new words. And the third speech pattern further reinforces the basis and changes some new words to other new words. So, what do models look like? Let's take the first speech pattern, the first couple of sentences. Each model enables us to master a certain grammar structure with the inclusion of a certain set of words on a certain topic. As for the words, we will talk about that later. Let's look at our first speech pattern as if it's the first level of the model. For example, in this model, the grammar construction present perfect continuous is trained. The most important thing is that we should always practice our skills from our native language to the foreign one. We have to practice the skill of spontaneous reproduction of thought or idea. That is, what we want to say based on the native language, because the native language we have known for a long time and quite well, and we think in it. So, for example, he's been working as a lifeguard on the beach since June. Then we take the second speech pattern, the second component of the model. He's been working as a bartender on the beach since May. The words highlighted in red can change, but the design remains the same. And let's take the third element. He's been working as a waiter on the beach since July. This is the basic principle of building our models. We need a lot of such models to work out the majority of constructions available in this or that language. As mentioned above, the models are grouped in collections. So we have about 200 of these models in each collection. In total, each collection with a large volume of speech patterns is aimed to work out from 3 to 8 grammatical structures. So imagine, each collection has 200 models, 600 sentences that you work out, and they are all devoted to either 3 or 5 or 8 specific grammatical structures. Each collection of models has a list of 500 words, which also cover several subject areas, for example, travel, shopping, hotel, and so on. These words are also combined into corresponding collections, and they have coverage within one collection of words from 3 to 10 thematic sections. In the future, we will see examples of these, and it will be clearer. Thus, the uniqueness of this metric structure lies precisely in the fact that, on the one hand, we are working on a specific, narrow set of grammatical constructions, while on the other hand, we also are working on a quite specific, quite narrow set of words. That is, we eat the elephant in pieces. We do not capture everything at once. We do not try to cover what's not covered and cannot be covered. We don't need to get scattered. We need to concentrate. In total, there are 7,500 words in the collections of words that represent the most necessary words, the most necessary thematic sections. Also, there are more than 3,000 models, which represent, respectively, more than 9,000 speech patterns. And we have 15 pairs of collections, that is, 15 collections of words and 15 collections of models. That is, we always have a pair usage of collections, a collection of models and a collection companion of words that are necessarily all used in the corresponding collection of models. For additional assistance in practicing free speech skills, There are also audio tracks of all speech models in our course. That's more than 15 hours of audio. Each collection is divided into 4-5 sections for convenience. All recordings are made in MP3 format, so you can use them on any device. Each collection of models is divided into 4-5 separate tracks. Each track contains about 50 models, which is the most optimal amount for working out in one session. Thus, each track lasts about 15 minutes. There are 64 tracks in the album. All phrases are recorded only in Russian. For multiple tracks, you can create your own playlists for each pass. It is recommended to listen to the tracks before working through each pass of model. So let's see what our collection looks like. In fact, these are PDF files that you can find in your personal account on the educational platform, and you can print them out and start working with them. Let's first look at what the file with the collection consists of. Naturally, this is the title of the collection. Next, under the title of the collection, we have a list of grammar structures. For example, this is the 9th collection, and we have a list of those grammar structures that are practiced in this 9th collection of models. For example, the interchange of present indefinite and present continuous, testing differences in the case of some and in no, mastering use of the gerund or infinitive. So the models are built on the principle of alternation. For example, 5 models when the gerund is used, 5 models when the infinitive is used. Once again, there is no grammar in this course. We do not explain how grammar works or how grammatical constructions are made. This is because grammar is explained everywhere, and it is very easy to find any sort of grammar manual and videos. We are working on the most important skill, spontaneous speech. And then we have our modal numbering separated by an empty line. All speech patterns in one model are placed one below the other. That is, first an English sentence and its translation into the Russian language underneath. Then the second English sentence and its translation into the Russian language underneath. And then the third English language, the third English sentence and the third speech pattern, and under it the translation into the Russian language. The page numbering and the title of the collection are indicated in the headers and footers, so you can always see what collection you are working on. It is also necessary to say that the models are arranged on the principle of cyclicity from the point of view of grammar. That is, the same grammatical structure, and as I said earlier, that 3 to 8 grammatical structures are implemented in each collection. It is worked out not in one, but in several collections. This means that in one collection, you have worked out some volume of models for a single grammatical structure, and you get the same structure in the next collection, already on a slightly smaller volume, and so on. For clarity, let's look at this example scheme. For example, the present continuous is a grammatical construction that is found in collection 3. Then we encounter the models for the same grammar structures in collection 4 in a slightly smaller volume. Then we come back to the same grammar construction in collection 7 and 12, even in a smaller amount. With this kind of cyclical approach, one way or another, you work with these structures for some extended time. You activate them, maintaining the relevance of the same neural connections, as we talked about in our theoretical part. And it is this long activation that gradually translates the use of this particular construction into long-term memory. That is, you form and constantly reinforce the skill. Also, for the purpose of the duration of the activation of information, The interchange of grammatical structure is largely used in our materials. That is, we need to be able to clearly define when to use, for example, the present indefinite tense and when to use the present continuous tense, as in this example. This is also a special skill that needs to be trained. The principle of interchange of grammar construction is very widely implemented in all of our collections of models. Let's see more examples for clarity. Here, the past indefinite tense is practiced in this model, on the one hand, as a grammar structure. On the other hand, the vocabulary associated with the car is used. So the first speech pattern, he pressed the brake pedal, but it did not work. Next speech pattern, she pressed the gas pedal, but it did not work. The third one, I pressed the clutch pedal, but it did not work. Let's look at some more examples. Here we work out the phrase there is, there are in a negative form, as well as the theme of travel, in particular the airport. The first speech pattern, there are no check-in desks in this part of the airport. The second pattern, there are no transit passengers in this part of the airport. And the third one, there are no departure gates in this part of the airport. Another example, here we trained introductory words, linking words, as well as we touch on the subject of clothing and shopping. The first pattern, at least these jeans fit my sweater. The second pattern, at least these pants fit your jacket. The third one, at least these gloves fit her dress. There are two stages in working with models. This is a very important point. The first step is to download. This is the most difficult and time-consuming stage. The second stage is the retention of information, which is a simpler step and requires less time. More mechanical, let's say. So let's summarize and once again emphasize the values that you get with this course. You get solid memorization of words and speech patterns. They are held for a long time and very reliable at the level of reflex. You will be surprised when in some text in Russian you will meet these words, these phrases as your old friends. They will stick firmly in your memory. Thanks to this solid memorization, you reach fluency. Words and expressions will appear to you directly at the moment when you need to express them, directly without mental translation. You will get clear instructions on how to build your own workouts. You will be your own coach. You will go on the right program. You will move forward non-stop. Like in any sport, the movement to a good result is achieved through multiple approaches and step by step overcoming resistance. It is often said about the need for daily language training, which of course is fair, but it is so commonplace that everyone is talking about it. But we must understand that while everyday training is good, you need to know what to include in this training and not randomly open the textbook and open brackets. And in our course, you will have a clear program of action on what you need to do every day. Also, you will determine a convenient load distribution. You will have alternating periods of greater and lesser load. That is, you can transfer a large load to the day off when you have more free time, and on weekdays when you have so many other various tasks, you can follow a routine route. But this routine, nevertheless, helps to create a uniform background of language learning. So, thank you very much for your attention and your time. Here are our contacts. Write your questions, your comments. We will always be happy to answer your questions. We wish you success in achieving the skill of fluent speech in Russian.